Hey guys, what is up? What's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. I'm Matthew Kristoff, and today I've got a cool one regarding ecosystem-based management. What's ecosystem-based management, you ask? I have no idea. We did a whole workshop trying to figure out what that means and how we can become more inclusive and sustainable and looking at the whole picture, the whole ecosystem as a whole, rather than focusing on and managing individual parts. You know what I mean? So trying to, instead of having like one conservation group focusing on grizzly bears and managing the whole landscape for grizzly bears and wanting to do that, and then having another group about caribou, and then having another group about the headwaters, and everyone's focused on their one particular issue and not really collaborating, right? So, and timber, same thing with forest industry. So this ecosystem-based management is the idea. We are going to try to look at it from the ecosystem, not individual issues and values, but all the values together, and try to manage them as a whole unit so that they're all sustainable through time. Anyways, I brought on two different people. First one, Ed Grumbine, and he's done a bunch of different stuff. He's been working to bring science info into the U.S. Federal land management since the 1980s. He lived in China as a senior international scholar for the Chinese Academy of Sciences, focusing on protected area and water issues. He's an author of multiple scientific papers, 3 books on biodiversity. He's really knowledgeable dude. Some people call him the father of ecosystem-based management, or one of. And it was a really great conversation. I only got 26 minutes with him. He's only up for a day, and he has lots going on, and he had done a full day of talking, and so I didn't want to wear him out. But he's really passionate about this kind of stuff, and it was really cool to get to talk to him. So we can hear about ecosystem-based management and kind of his thoughts on it, and where he kind of thinks it's heading, that kind of stuff. So I hope you guys like it. Sponsors, same 3: Greenlink Forestry. Thank you very much. Couldn't do without you. Forest Resource Improvement Association, same thing. Could not do this without you guys. Thank you so much. Also, Damaged Timber is an apparel company out of Edmonton supporting environmental sciences through the sale of their clothing. 10% of what they sell goes towards a scholarship they're trying to create for environmental science students. So if you want to support something like that, and you're looking for a hat or a toque or a sweater, really cool stuff. The logo is a caribou hoof with some trees silhouetted in it. It's really neat. And my favorite hat's there. I love their stuff. It's really cool. You can put in Your Forest 10 at checkout, and you can get 10% off. And they're always having all kinds of sales and stuff like that. So those are the sponsors. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. I think you guys are going to like this one. Ed is awesome. Really cool guy. Thanks a lot. Here we go. First of all, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this. This will be awesome. I have to admit, I hadn't heard of you before a couple weeks ago, and saw that you've had a couple books out, and you're involved with a bunch of research and stuff like that. How did you first get involved in environmental sciences? How did that, what drove your passion for that?
Well, it's the 21st century today, and we have to go back to the 20th century to answer that question. So think of a time when we didn't know much about habitat fragmentation. We had no clue about disturbance and its role in shaping forests. The field of conservation biology didn't even exist. There was no journal. There was no major you could take at university. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to go too far back. We're talking the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And then things started coming together. Leaders appeared, papers and research were produced that gave us a sense of what we were missing in our land management practices. Mm-hmm. And a professional society was born. Managers began to learn of a lot of new things very rapidly. And as a younger person back then, I was part of that edge. And specifically what drove me as a U.S. citizen mm-hmm. was what we needed to do in our federal lands management that could improve upon what we were doing.
Gotcha.
We had We had models that were lacking many critical pieces. Mm-hmm. And so I took what was coming out of the science literature and attempted to use that as a filter to understand what was missing from our federal lands management policy. And so putting those two things together got me started on the path where I sit with you today.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's what it takes, right? Just being able to see in between the lines and figure out what we're missing, right? That's great.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've been called, someone here mentioned you might be one of the fathers of ecosystem-based management.
I was in the right place at the right time.
So to that, let's just get right off the bat. Ecosystem-based management. It's a concept that, like, even in school, it sounded really, really good, right? I'm like, ecosystem-based management. Yes, like that sounds so perfect, right? But what is it, right? So, like, I think a lot of people, especially in the forest industry, and it's not just a forest industry concern. It's a global concern around agriculture and land in general, not just forestry. But speaking to that, and just it sounds really good. People in school think that that's what we're doing. We're doing ecosystem-based management. We plan around multiple use values like water and timber and habitat and biodiversity and traditional use, right, by indigenous peoples and stuff. And sure, we plan around that. But how is ecosystem-based management different from that? How is it evolving? So let's just get into the basis of it. What is it, and how is it different from what we're currently doing?
Well, I would say ecosystem-based management, let's call it EBM, is holistic, both in terms of the different biological and ecological details, species versus habitat management versus terrestrial versus marine, watersheds. Ecosystem-based management tries to capture all the ecological pieces of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of it. You might call that the E part of ecosystem-based management. But the M part is more process-oriented. How we go about doing that management. Do we do it top-down? Do we do it bottom-up? Do we collaborate? Do we create dictums in federal law or policy or provincial law or policy that demand that we do this a certain way or follow this prescription? Right. So the E part kind of is the baseline. This is what species and ecosystems need from us to continue to function healthily. Got it. How we do that is the other big piece. And ecosystem-based management folks would want us to do more rather than less collaboration, more rather than less working together with diverse groups of stakeholders, be more rather than less inclusive in how we deliberate together to construct the best management practices going forward. So that would be one way to frame EBM.
Right. So basically, I guess, instead of having organizations or companies that they're focused on one specific resource and managing that one resource, let it be water or timber or whatever it is, or conservation groups managing bear habitat or owls or whatever. You're talking about a system that's allowing collaboration, bring together all of those groups and look at it from a higher perspective so we can see the impact that each one has on the other. So right now there's an argument that we're, for example, in the forest industry, like I said, I'm a forester, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Right? There's an argument that we're kind of in a timber-based approach and that we're thinking about those other values and they're on our minds. But I mean, even myself, I would argue that they're not playing a big enough role. And like there's all kinds of stuff. I would argue we're doing a great job, but it can always be better. We're always moving forward and evolving the industry and trying to get it to a place where we're emulating natural disturbance as much as possible and having the minimal amount of impact, right? So yeah, I guess it's just kind of a collaboration of management and trying not to focus on individual problems as much as the grand scheme, I suppose, right?
Well, I would say focus on the individual problems, but knit them into a larger whole. Mm-hmm. you have to have specific information about how ecosystems function, or say the habitat needs of woodland caribou, or any other particular species of concern. But you have to, one way I look at it is, if you're doing EBM, you're working on a specific problem, but you think about one step higher and one step lower from where your problem sits, so you can get a context that will help you change up a little bit, and sometimes a lot, how you manage your specific problem.
Right.
Another piece of EBM would be learning to adapt to a changing world. And you just captured some of that a moment ago when you used the disturbance word, the D word. Back in the 80s when EBM was just getting off the ground, managing for disturbance really didn't happen.
Right.
So it's not like EBM is all of a sudden here today. It's been here, and we have made a lot of progress incorporating some of the elements that the EBM would direct our attention to, disturbance being one of the critical ones, especially in a fire-based system like boreal forests are.
Yeah.
So what happened is, before we understood the role of disturbance in boreal systems, we managed as if disturbance didn't exist, and that has created some problems for us in the present day that EBM can help us resolve.
Right.
There's a lot of biomass out there where many of our forest service are way out of whack in terms of their range of natural variability. That if we look back in the historical record of how the ecosystems are structured, we're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So what do we do to get back to that? That partly would be ecosystem-based management.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the tough thing, right? And we always kind of want to tell ourselves that that's what we're doing, I think we're right. I think we've been moving towards that since the beginning, and we're in the middle of it now, right? And it's about making it better and constantly improving and being more inclusive of specific values that are maybe not being focused on. For example, traditional use from indigenous peoples.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. That's a huge one that I know. At least I know a few projects here in Alberta that are working towards creating inventories that put that into the forest inventory, their timber inventory, and kind of include that as part of the value scheme, right? And that's super important, and I'm glad we're doing that. And it's amazing to think that hasn't happened yet, and that's just happening now. So, I think some people might take offense to the idea that we're maybe not doing ecosystem-based management. They would argue that we are, and I would say, yeah, we probably are to some extent. We definitely are, but there's always room for improvement, right?
Well, look at it this way. Think of EBM as part of a learning curve, and think of your own schooling as an example of a personal learning curve. Some people say that when you stop learning, you're dead.
Yeah.
And so when you stop doing EBM, you might have a bigger problem than the problems that EBM is trying to resolve. So in other words, if new information leads to new awareness, leads to new learning, then the end of that is not a perfect scenario. The end of that is doing better than you did before. And the next chapter will be more new learning if you remain open to it. Yeah. And then you'll do better in chapter 3. But there aren't any final chapters in the story of learning until you're retired or past or something like that. So the cool thing about EBM is that it recognizes the learning cycle as a part of management systems. There's no end product other than the process of continuing adapting to new learning about a changing world.
Right.
And when we have climate-driven change, which is triggering rapid, large-scale changes both in the boreal forest and in the global climate system, that compels us to keep learning and maybe even increase the rate of our learning as the rate of change in our ecosystems increases.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's exactly like you said, right? Every time we get better at something, it opens up a new door, and we realize that we're missing this much more, right? It's continual. It's not like. So I guess I'll ask you that question at the end. I gotta try and make sense of this and follow a timeline of some kind. But one thing I wanted to ask you is how do we go about assessing value, like non-monetary value in ecosystem services, right? So, for example, right now, again, forestry. I'm a forester.
Yeah.
Timber is valued at a dollar value, right? And we plan for water, but how do we put some kind of equivalent value on habitat and water and air and carbon capture and indigenous use that allows us to create, this is kind of making it sound like it's all monetary, but that's not what I mean. I mean, allowing us to create a decision matrix that tells us should we or should we not do this action on the landscape, right? And I think right now it's all based off of ideals, and people say, well, I'm a conservationist. I think that we should conserve this landscape and leave it for old growth and caribou and on and on. And the timber guy says, well, the caribou don't use that, and we're like, we could use the sustainable resource, which is wood, and the water, you know what I mean? Everyone's got, and it's all based on that. And right now the decisions are being based off of which one's more popular, it seems like. Do you have any idea how we could create a system that would allow us, the decision matrix, like I said, of how to make those decisions without having to, ask the biased people what, you know what I mean? I mean, that's that long term down the line. I'm thinking that's kind of where we need to go, right? I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Well, it's a tough question, and so I don't have anything that's a slam dunk answer.
I wouldn't expect that. If you did, I might be.
Then maybe I would be wealthier than I am right now. Or
I'm not expecting you to be a god. We'll be okay.
Yeah,
it's an impossible question, really.
So one way to answer it from an EBM perspective is that nobody has a corner on wisdom. Whether it's scientific information or social understanding. Mm-hmm. And so when nobody has all the answers, a lot of people working collaboratively may construct a more durable answer than a few experts who have, by definition, less information. Mm-hmm. So you work with people, and you expand the circle out and try to capture as much of the values that exist out there. Mm-hmm. So that's one strategy. Mm-hmm. There are some things that are not particularly negotiable. Mm-hmm. Climate change would be the one that's of most concern to me these days. Of course, yeah. We can choose, as we more or less have been choosing, to not do anything about it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, but at some point, there will be a critical mass will have been reached. Tipping points will have been tipped, mm-hmm. and we'll have, at the end of the day, less decision space than we might have had if we had worked on this earlier. So what I'm trying to say is, humans are complex animals, and we have, because of our system of government and because of the constraints of our economic system, mm-hmm. we tend to privilege hierarchy. We tend to privilege bottom lines, and we don't construct very broad-scale cost-benefit analyses. But the more we put attention into doing that, we'll capture more of the diversity of opinion out there, and will, over time, have something more durable result.
Thank God for the internet.
Yes. And so there's plenty of scientific information out there, but it's not well understood by outside of the academic or expert or even managerial community.
Yeah.
And so communications is a key part of EBM and should be a key part of any management system. But we have also assumed, because of our culture of expertise, that that more information solves problems.
Yeah.
But if no one understands that information or has access to it, then the information doesn't necessarily create progress.
Yeah.
I've worked in some countries where there's even less transparency and even less information available to the common folks than exists in Canada or the U.S. Mm-hmm. And that just has helped me understand how important communications is and open, transparent systems.
Yeah.
Better than I couldn't really understand that until I left our rule of law based system and worked in systems with EBM goals where rule of law was much less secure. Mm-hmm. So being inclusive is usually better, and ecosystem based management makes it a key element of the system. Inclusivity is valued over exclusivity.
Yeah.
It's not like experts don't have a leg up through their expertise, but how that's communicated and how that's captured in a democratic system is both a challenge and a value that comes out of EBM.
Yeah, no kidding.
I can be ignorant, and my vote still counts.
Yep.
So compared to an expert who might not be ignorant about fire cycles, but he or she still has a vote and only one vote too. Yeah. So given that disparity in a social system, how do you bring those different elements into conversation together? Is one of the challenges of EBM.
Right. So trying to bring scientific literacy to society, which is an age-old problem, right? Like,
yes.
I've said that. I don't know how many episodes I've said that. Wow, it seems like public education, seems to be the problem or the solution to our problem, right? And it's true, and I think that's what's good about, well, not to toot my own horn, but trying to do stuff like this where people can listen in to experts like yourself talk about this kind of stuff, right? And in a setting where they can understand what you're saying, not just a non-contextual blurb that a reporter decided to pull out of an interview or something, right? So how do you think, this is more on the social side of it, how do you think we can make this seem, one of the last questions that was said at the workshop here that we're at was, how do we make this seem less like a constraint on society and on values and more like an opportunity to better ourselves and better our future? How do you think we start to do that, start to change people's minds to accept that, yeah, we might not be able to go quadding in this area as much as we used to because it's making an impact, and we may not be able to harvest this, or we may not, whatever it is, right? Or may need to do more burning or whatever. I think people see these types of things when you start pulling away what they have done in the past. They think that that's removing their rights, right? Whereas they don't ask themselves whether or not they should have been allowed to do that thing in the first place. So how do we ease the public into understanding that things are going to change, and they're going to have to, if we want to keep things more or less the way they are, or the way they should be ecologically for the foreseeable future, right? So that's what I'm wondering, is just as far as the social side of it. It's again, another impossible question.
Well, I'll give you an impossible answer. I have found valuable, not just in my own work, but in listening to the stories of managers who are being asked the same questions due to the management problems they face.
Yeah.
I'm less interested in a particular detail of a particular management issue, and I'm more interested in how to help people cultivate a sense of being able to learn new things. So it almost doesn't make any difference what the problem is. It's all about your attitude going into whatever problem you might be faced with.
For sure.
So how can I remain open to new information? It would help that when the experts generate new information, they do it in a manner that is accessible and understandable. But let's say that occurs. Even if I understand the new information, how do I keep myself flexible and adaptive to learning new things?
Totally.
So whatever specific skills would help me remain flexible and open to change is what we need to do as a society to be able to deal with the coming stressors that we'll face. If you have those basic skills, it's almost like a basic skill that we get in our schooling, which is how to think critically. It doesn't make any difference what specific topic you need to think critically about. But if you have the skill of thinking critically, then you'll make more progress working through the costs, the benefits, the context, the details, the macro view, because you have been trained and now you get the critical thinking process. The same thing with adaptive learning, being open and flexible to new information. It's just one of those core human skills that's teachable, that we need to do a better job of preparing ourselves to do by teaching those skills to younger generations and being open as an older generation to maintaining those skills in ourselves.
And I think that's applicable to pretty much anything in life, right?
Yep.
Just be open to new information. Don't feel like it's going against your values or what you did or what you stood for. Just understand that things are changing, and let's take in this new information, think about it rationally and critically, and come up with a new set of ideals rather than taking it as a bash on ourselves. The last thing I was going to ask you was if you had any information or any advice for maybe forest professionals listening, if they wanted to take action and start implementing more ecosystem-based management stuff, what would you say? And I'm guessing you'd probably say that, exactly what you just said.
I would, and I would say something like, think about what your job requires you to engage with, but you feel like you're not very prepared. Maybe you lack a certain skill set or something like that. So I go back to my schooling and I say, well, I didn't get any training in working with groups. I didn't get any coursework in communicating the results of my science. I didn't get training in how to listen to people.
That's a tough one.
I didn't get a lot of different training.
Yep.
And so as a manager in the present tense, if you're having trouble solving a problem, look at your skill set. You probably have already done this without being focused on it. And you say, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, or how do I solve this problem? I don't have that. So my advice is do a little critical thinking about what's lacking in your toolkit, and then go out and buy some tools. Go take some workshops, get in-course training. If in the U.S., our managers go to in-service training all the time. Just see what you need that you didn't get that might help you become a better manager, and then go out and get it. That's one answer to the question.
That's awesome. No, I couldn't sum it up better myself. That's perfect. So we're sitting at 26 minutes. We're already 6 minutes over what I said I would do, so we better shut her down. But I appreciate you coming on. This was awesome. And if you're ever back in the city, let's do this again. Yeah.
Well, I used to be a teacher for most of my career, and the best teachers I ever met were those that were always willing to learn from their students. So there's a generational thing going on here too. It's easy to talk about old school, don't do social media, new school, that's all people do. But if you get into communication, the world changes, and you have to stay with those changes. You have to keep surfing. Anybody who loves surfing wants to stay on the wave, and ecosystem-based managers need to learn how to cultivate the challenge of staying on a wave.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
This is great.
Perfect.